Hello, I'm Ben, and I'm here with none other than Alexander Technique teacher extraordinaire, Anthony Kingsley. Anthony is an Alexander teacher with over 30 years of experience. He's also a psychotherapist. He leads the Alexander Technique training school, where I've been for the last year and a half. And I can honestly say I've never come across a professional in any field who has the same level of kind of relentless, infectious passion for their art as Anthony does. Anthony wrote the introduction to the latest edition of The Use of the Self, which is the seminal work in the Alexander Technique. The front cover of this book says he's a wealth expert teacher. In this introduction, Anthony sets out a manifesto of sorts for a radical take on the Alexander Technique. And I mean radical not so much in the sense of doing something which tosses away everything and starts anew, but really getting to the essence of what the technique is really about. And this will be the topic of our conversation today. And in particular, we'll be looking at Anthony's brand for this reworking of Alexander, which is Mind Zero, which sounds very sexy and cool to my ears. And Anthony's keen that this Mind Zero and Alexander can provide not only benefits for postural rebalancing, which has been the traditional benefit proposed for Alexander, but also for facilitating peak performance and emotional healing. So, thank you, Anthony. I hope I haven't made you blush too much.
Much too much. Can we start again?
So, Anthony, why don't I dive in, going straight in for the kill, the big question, which is, what is Mind Zero, and how does it relate to the Alexander Technique? How is it developed, and why the departure from the Alexander brand?
Yeah, well, the Alexander brand is very, very wide, and there's so many excellent teachers all over the world, and we all have a different take of what the Alexander Technique is really all about. We have different styles and different understandings, different interpretations of the Alexander legacy, and I still see my work as the Alexander Technique, but I suppose I wanted to brand it in a way that honoured my understanding of Alexander, and not to feel I have to clash with other Alexander teachers and say, well, this is the Alexander Technique, and then the other teachers say, well, this is the Alexander Technique. It's something I wanted to sort of exit from, that sort of dialogue. So I branded my understanding of the Alexander Technique as Mind Zero, not because Mind Zero is something outside of Alexander. Mind Zero for me is what I understand the Alexander Technique to be all about. So really it's just a brand so I can avoid conflict rather than a new thing. I haven't invented anything new. I don't believe I've invented anything new, but it's my own personal take, and I'm certainly not wanting to say it's the legitimate Alexander. Again, that's another reason I've chosen another word. I'm not saying it's the only Alexander. I'm not saying it's what Alexander would approve of if he came down and said hello. It's just my understanding, and it's personal. It's my personal take on what I believe is the quintessential, the essence of the Alexander Technique as I practice and I understand.
Yes, and often when we're training, all the ideas that you're putting forward, I mean, they're backed up by things that Alexander has said. And could you maybe touch on one or two of the most inspirational ideas for Mind Zero coming from Alexander?
Yes. So we were reading in class today one of Alexander's books, The Universal Constant in Living, which is an excellent book. And the 4th chapter is called A Technique for Prevention. And I take that very seriously. It's a technique for prevention in the widest sense. And the way I understand the Alexander Technique is as a technique for preventing the distorting effects of reactions to living, not just the reactions to speaking. We all know Alexander's history. He lost his voice when reciting. And you can see it as a wrong use of his voice, but that's much, much, much too narrow. And maybe Alexander saw his technique at the beginning as a voice issue or a breathing issue. But as he went along, over the years, he became more and more of a generalist and less of a specific Alexander that concentrated on voice. And when you say I do refer a lot to what Alexander wrote, it's true. Alexander wrote a lot of things over 40 odd years. And I suppose I'm more interested in the things he wrote later on. And I don't necessarily go along with everything he wrote at the beginning. He was constantly evolving his own thought processes, his understanding, throughout his clinical work and his thinking about what he was doing. And later on in his life, he really understood his work as a technique of preventing reaction. He said, "You all think my work is about getting in and out of a chair properly," which is, what a lot of people think. It's about how to stand properly, how to have a good spine, how to have the shoulders nicely broadening. He said, "You all think my technique is about getting in and out of a chair properly. It's nothing of the kind. It's about receiving a stimulus and learning not to react against the habits of life." And I think that's so exciting, really exciting, that actually it doesn't really matter how you sit and stand. It's a function of how you cope with everything in living, life's ups and downs, life's struggles and hopes and dreams and aspirations, all the things that happen to us in an average life, and all the dramas, and how we cope with it, how we manage it. Do we manage it in a way that disturbs and distorts ourselves? Alexander called it the self, the psychophysical self. Or do we manage the struggles and the ups and downs and the frustrations and hopes and disappointments and pains and losses, all these things, in a way that isn't so destructive to the health of the organism, to the health of the mind-body? And that for me is really exciting, that actually the thing that hurts us isn't necessarily the event. Alexander was very clear, it's how we react to the event. Two people can have the same event or stimulus and come out totally different. And I think the work, the deep Alexander work, is how to manage some of the things that really are quite big stimuli, big struggles, in a way that isn't so harmful or so disturbing and so toxic for the mind-body, for the psychophysical self.
So we talk a lot about the prevention of reaction to stimuli.
Yeah.
Would you agree that in this modern environment we find ourselves in, where the number of stimuli vying for our attention and competing to rip us away from ourselves, it seems to be exploding in number, that this ability to sort of retain poise and keep our center is more vital than ever, and as such Alexander's work is really it's right.
I think it's very timely. I think today, in this pandemic, there are so many new stimuli or more powerful stimuli. We are all facing our own mortality in a way that we didn't have to before. We are facing illness. We are facing illness of our loved ones or more. We are facing uncertainty, the loss of our professions, loss of income. We're facing disruption in our social lives. We can't hold, kiss, hug our friends. We socially distance. This is a really big shift in the way we have to live, and these are huge stimuli. And I do think you're right, Alexander. The work we can do today can help us cope a little bit more with the ravages of stimuli that are bombarding our nervous systems and, as you say, vying for attention, vying for some response. And I think Alexander was very, very clear that when the nervous system becomes overwhelmed, we are not at our best. He said his words for overwhelm were out of touch with reason. Sometimes he referred to them as emotional gusts, when our emotional reactions would overpower our ability to stay okay, to stay with our brains in gear, as he said, in touch with reason. He didn't mean some cerebral intellectualization, but is our brain still functioning? Are we okay? Can we still think? Or are we just seeing red and going around like headless chickens? And so for Alexander, certainly towards the end of his life, the technique was very much about recovering the ability to stay in touch with reason, to stay with our engagement with our thoughts and feelings, and not being overwhelmed by over-demanding stimuli. Those are his words. Stimuli were the things that happen to us, and the reaction to those stimuli is the way that we cope or don't cope with the temptations of being overwhelmed. And so the discipline of the Alexander technique, at its best, is a technique to develop capacities to cope better. Forget being an angel. I certainly lose the plot frequently.
Likewise.
But it does help to mitigate some of the overreactions I would be certainly performing without having engaged in this discipline for 35, 40 years. But some things will overwhelm me, some things will throw me. Some things will throw me out of my reason, and I'll be less effective, my performance will go right down, and I won't be functioning in a particularly healthy way. Hopefully I'll recover a little bit quicker with all the work I've done over the years, but I'm not immune to losing the plot.
Perhaps if you were immune to losing the plot, you'd maybe lose a bit of the fire for doing Alexander work. You know, having materials to work through kind of gives you that passion.
Well, I've still got loads to work through, that's for sure. And I also am very passionate that I can keep on evolving, that I haven't reached some point where I can say, oh, that's enough now, just relax. I hope there's a long way to go in evolving human capacities. I've still got a lot of patience to learn, that's for sure. And I hope a lot of ripening as well, how I cope with stimuli to be more available. For me, Alexander's worth nothing, absolutely nothing, unless I become more resonant, more vital, more emotionally available, more able to think clearly and to function at a higher level. You know, if it's just about helping me with a little back problem, for me it hasn't got very much juice. It doesn't really excite me.
Yeah.
But something that can help me function at a better level, that can help me have better relationships, that enable me to listen to someone who is talking to me rather than going off into my own dramas. You know, these are things that I do believe that good Alexander work can promote. And that's everything, that's the whole of life. So there's every reason to be passionate about this technique if it can offer such a wide range of human potential and human benefits.
I totally agree, and we come back to the prevention cure thing here. Yeah. This is not just a therapy that you have to make you feel nice, right? This is, you know, attuning one's nervous system so we can cope better in everyday life. And I think this pandemic fueled crazy epoch has forced a lot of people to confront their own mental health and the fact that they're being overreacted. So I think the idea or the fantasy of being less reactive is probably quite persuasive to people watching this. But I wonder, how does this come about? How does it work?
All right. Okay. I was just reminded of a wonderful poem by Rudyard Kipling, If. I don't know if you've come across it. If you can keep your head while all the rest are losing theirs, and so on and so forth. And in a way, Alexander's very much about, can we keep our heads where normally we'd lose the plot? We'd, as you say, go into overreactive states. And how does it come about? Well, like anything of any value, it comes about through discipline, not through wishful thinking. And the discipline We do it in an Alexander lesson, one-to-one, and we do it in an Alexander school, which is much more immersive and perhaps deeper. But the principle's the same. What we do is we present a pupil or a student with something, usually a stimulus to move. Essentially sitting, standing, talking, maybe they bring in their musical instrument, and they would normally do what they do. So I might be playing a musical instrument, I might be playing a violin, and when it gets a little bit tricky, I might start to tighten and get a little bit effortful, and I might start feeling stuff going on in my neck and shoulders. And I think, goodness, I'm not at my best right now. I've lost my freedom, my flow. And the teacher uses guidance, touch, usually with hands, or not only with the hands, but essentially this is one of our greatest gifts, we touch, which is why it's so difficult at the moment in the pandemic that we can't touch so easily and spontaneously. But we use touch as a way of indicating, a way of being in ourselves that is less and less disturbed. So if someone can put their hands on me and guide my movements so that I can play even the most difficult pieces with my mind-body, staying essentially very, very still. And I don't mean still in terms of movement, I mean still in terms of the noise of the nervous system, still in terms of a deep sense of relaxation. And at the same time playing with passion and vitality, then I'm going to find myself in a very, very different zone. And it's described in various places over many generations of being in the flow, being in the moment, mindfulness. You know, these aren't something separate to Alexander. I think what Alexander found was a technique that offered these things in a very effective way, in a discipline that works. And I'm certainly not saying Alexander's the only game in town. There's wonderful games in town. But it's one game I've found that is methodical, that it's deep, that it grows, it's constructive, it deepens over time, that it evolves some capacity in your mind-body, in your nervous system, that it's clear, it's objective. You can see when a person's disturbed or not based on their body language. And that touch, the Alexander touch, is immediate. If you are in a good state of psychophysical health, you as a teacher, and you put hands on
maybe just for a lay
mind body.
Okay, yeah.
The organism. Alexander talks about the human being as a mind body whole. He said he can't separate a person into that bit's mental and that bit's physical and that bit's spiritual. He said it's impossible. The human being is a totality. He called it a psychophysical spiritual organism, that we're just everything. And so when a person, a human being, or what he called a self, is in a state of ease, of stillness, at the moment of deep relaxation, and at the same time vital and alive, because it's this paradoxical combination of stillness and vitality, relaxation and poise, stillness and energy. It isn't one or the other. It's not so much stillness that you go to sleep. It's not so much vitality that you end up causing yourself to have a nervous headache. It's a combination in the same hand, yin-yang, stillness, relaxation, vitality. It's all these things, it's all together. So when you, the teacher, or me, the teacher, are in my better state, that I'm certainly not in all the time, but when I'm in my better or best state, and I guide you and move you, I transmit something of my essential self to you, the pupil, and it's not very strange to understand. You know, if you hug somebody and you're in a good mood and everything, they feel a nice, warm, embracing hug. And if you're very nervous and you hug someone, it's not quite the same. You don't feel quite completed in the hug. And so Alexander touch is nothing bizarre, that we communicate what's going on inside of us through touch. The difference between a nervous handshake and an embracing handshake, they're very different, aren't they? And the Alexander touch which we need to develop over 3 years of training, is that sort of thing. The Alexander touch conveys our sense of self, our experience of ourselves, our flow, our ease, or otherwise. And if you're being guided by a teacher who's in a good state of both stillness and poise, and they put hands on you while you're doing something, singing, sitting, standing, it'll transform your nervous system at the point of contact into being in a different state of mind-body. And you'll find yourself performing even simple acts, like sitting, standing and walking, in a way that is dramatically different to your everyday. And it is mind-blowing. You know, people say, well, goodness, I feel like I'm walking on air, or I feel so relaxed, or I feel so light. I didn't realize things could be so easy, or I can't remember the last time I've been so relaxed, apart from when I was on a summer holiday somewhere, I was just lying on a hammock. But this isn't just relaxation. This is a quality of deep relaxation and activity. John Dewey, a famous pupil of Alexander's, called it a quality of thinking in activity. This quality of mind that is available in life, in doing things, rather than separate from. It's not like a separate meditation and then you go off and do your stuff, but something that's actually inherent in every single act of living.
Yeah, because even though we're performing basic movements form the basis of everything that we do in life.
Everything,
right?
yeah.
And also, there's something I find peculiar about having the inspiration of touch. It's almost as if you're drinking in the teacher's use or their state, and that your system at some level can register that and learn it, and then it can learn to do it.
I think that's right. I think in Alexander, you learn through the experience of the guidance of the teacher. You drink in the teacher's way of being in the world through the teacher's guidance, the teacher's touch, and that becomes you. It evolves inside of you. And until it becomes more available for you without the guidance of the teacher. Something grows as a capacity, as a resource. And that becomes, as I said, more available for you to then look after yourself in a very different way. And then, of course, pass it on to others through your own guidance as a teacher. But you're right, there's something very human about human contact. We are tactile beings, we are human beings, and we're designed to touch and be touched. And there's kind touch and there's less kind touch, and the Alexander touch should be kind, and it should influence you in a way that transforms your own way of being in the world into something much more harmonious and kind, and I mean kind to yourself. And one way of looking at Alexander is the highest level of being kind to yourself. And the other way, the way of looking at the problems that people bring to Alexander is when we're not so kind to ourselves, and we come with a neck ache, a back problem, an eye strain, indigestion, fatigue, stress, addictions, all the stuff when we're not so kind to ourselves. And the Alexander technique is a way of saying, look, these things that you're doing to yourself, you're not doing them because you're silly, but because you don't know another way at the moment. And the teacher can guide you into another experience and to work through some of your old habit patterns to recover what is essentially much kinder. And Alexander called that a good use of self.
Yeah, and as a result, I guess, because you have the input of the teacher, you can reveal blind spots that you might not otherwise be able to see doing something alone, such as meditation. That is certainly my experience.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of people have said to me, can you watch the way I do yoga, or can you watch how I meditate? And some people would say, okay, I'm going to meditate, and I'll do something like this. I'll say, okay, meditate, and I'll go. There's plenty of excellent meditators out there, but then the teacher can see, when you're meditating, it seems like you have an idea that you have to sort of relax a little bit or concentrate a bit, and I can see it. Yes, and they're not doing anything silly, but you can help refine that that actually meditation is possible without efforting, without striving, without too much ambition, and it might transform their meditative practice.
Certainly transform mine.
It's exciting, isn't it?
It is.
Not because I know very much about meditation. I'm clearly no expert in meditation. My area of expertise is more about watching how a person performs things, how a person holds up their violin or meditates or does a yoga movement, how a person brushes their teeth. It's the how. I'm not a technician in their chosen area of passion. And that's where we have an ability to transform the habits of how they do things.
Should we do a little demo?
We can do a demo. There's one thing I wanted to say that it may sound almost Pollyanna-ish that the Alexander teacher just transforms and sticks hands on everything's nice and easy, and who wouldn't want to be free and open? I just want to say one thing that is really quite critical to the whole enterprise. When someone comes in a struggle, and we all struggle, when someone comes in a bit of a pickle, and they've got a neck ache or a back problem or a digestive issue or eye strain, and you see that they're not in a great state, and then every time they sit and stand, there's this compression and contraction of the organism. They're not doing it because they're silly, or because they should be told just to stop doing it. It's because
just be present.
Just be present. Just let go. Just be present. Just be mindful. It doesn't work like that. If being mindful, and maybe the better word would be mind empty rather than mindful, which is another story.
Mind zero.
Or mind zero, which is the point I'm trying to make. If it was that easy, we'd all be there. Yeah. And the point is that when we have these habitual patterns of reaction and buzz and speed and contraction and efforting, it's because actually the organism needs to do that, because the alternative, and this is really important, the alternative of going towards mind zero is not easy. That actually to be in this condition when I'm frightened is not as easy as to be in this condition. To be in this condition when I'm sad is nowhere near as easy as going, I'm fine, everything's good. It's not as easy. Why? Because actually human experience isn't easy. Sadness is not easy. Human distress is not easy to sit with. Nothing's easy. And sometimes if we've had difficulty in our lives, and the truth is I don't know anyone that hasn't, some major traumas and some less major, the organism finds a way to make things a bit easier. And that can be internal habits of compression and holding and feeling safe by pulling everything together. It might be distracting myself by running around with craziness and mania and being a shopaholic and a workaholic and a thisaholic and that, or using substances, chemical substances, to divert me away from sitting with. And sitting with is not easy. And when I talk about mind zero, or the essence of the Alexander technique, if you're lucky enough to find a teacher that works well for you, they will enable you to go through the fire and sit with yourself, essentially. This isn't so much about learning how to sit and stand or move properly, but actually to sit with your internal stimuli, your internal reality, the facts of your own existence, your hopes and dreams and disappointments, your hurts and losses, and to sit with that without what I will call reaction. To go closer to the mind zero, where everything is available, or more is available, and less is distracted. Where more is in the flow and less is compressed and stuck. Where you are sitting with your emotional reality rather than distracting yourself away from it with very understandable strategies. And one way of seeing Alexander is people come in with their strategies, and that's the best they can manage. They're in pain or struggle, and in a way the technique is a way of saying, let's see if you can open up a little bit to your greater reality and work through those needs to be somewhere else, in order to be here. And that's a big enterprise, and I think the more I can look after myself and go through that process within my own soul, the more I can help another person go through theirs. And that's the essence of being an Alexander teacher, that you give what you are, and you can't give what you haven't got. And so the deeper I can go, which is why I'm still passionate about Alexander, because I've got so far to go still, that the more I can keep deepening and ripening, I can be more available to another person who's going through their process. And it's that parallel process of teacher-pupil that really excites me, because it's ongoing, it's never ending, and I don't see an end point in terms of my own evolution. And each day is another step on my own journey as I'm accompanying someone else along theirs.
And I suppose as well, once you've gone through your own stuff and you come into contact with a pupil who is perhaps nervous about going through their own stuff, the fact that they're coming into contact with you, and at some level your system is saying it's okay to do that because I've done it and sort of...
Haven't done it, but I'm doing it.
You know,
yes.
You know what I mean? Then
some of it.
It kind of gives permission for that.
Yeah.
And I suppose as well that this kind of dismisses the idea that Alexander is a kind of thing you do because it makes you feel nice, that kind of thing.
No, I think that's...
It's opening you up to the world rather than
closing it down.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's what you said is really very, very important. It isn't necessarily a feel-good technique. You might sometimes feel not so good. You might be more in touch with some sadness and distress. You might go through a grieving process more deeply with this work, rather than leaving it in an unfinished box somewhere. It's not a Pollyanna walk in the park picnic. You might be walking through the fire with hopefully someone holding your hand. But when you come out after having walked through the fire with someone who is guiding you, there is an increase in health and well-being and functioning. Do you want to do some work? Okay, so I'm going to...
I think it's mask time.
Mask time, yes. Okay, so I'm ready. I'm communicating something. For better or for worse, this is Anthony. And I'm putting my hands on, and whatever condition I'm in, you can't help but receive it. And the point about the hands is, I'm not here to change you, that they're here to say hello, really, but hello to all that you are. And they're not saying, you know what, your shoulders are in the wrong place, you've got to relax this and release this. That's not the way it works. There's more of an invitation, but not a criticism, certainly not a judgment of what you are. And I have my hands here. And I'm going to suggest that you sit in the chair in a minute. And I want to offer you another opportunity of not going into a compression pattern or a reactive pattern as you move. So hips back and bend the knees, and at the chair stop. And there's nothing you need to do. At the moment, my only request is that you allow me to move you, and there's nothing you need to get right. I'm going to take you forwards, stop. I'm going to take you backwards. So now I'm taking you off this idea that you have to sit and stand. At the moment I'm just taking you back and forwards, so there's no big deal. Taking you forwards, and I'm taking you back again. Now most people, when they are about to get out of a chair, start to do an anticipation of effort. I'm about to stand, and all the organism starts to get ready. It prepares itself to stand up with a snatch. It's almost like we just jump into the future all the time. We snatch at the future. And very much part of the technique is not to keep on jumping into the future. We talk about mindfulness, but actually if you try to be mindful, you end up in a bit of a pickle of concentration. But the Alexander work has a very indirect approach to everything. It said if we stop you jumping into the future, you are in a mindful condition, rather than let's work out how to be mindful. Mm-hmm. So the second I stop you jumping into the future, you're here. Here and now, be here now, and all that stuff which you can
Is this
pick
what
up.
you mean by mind zero?
Exactly. So mind zero is minimizing reactions to stimuli to the point of almost, or sometimes maybe nothing. No reaction. Doesn't mean no action, doesn't mean no feeling, but no reaction. So we're going to stand. We're just using this as a little prop to explore life. I'm taking you forwards, and you're going to get out of a chair in a minute. No preparation, no disturbance, no noise, no effort at all. I'm going to take you further forwards. No noise, no effort. Stop. No rushing ahead of yourself. Wait. Stand up with your heels. That's it. Fine.
Yeah, and I suppose it feels to me that there's very little going on in terms of mental chatter and anticipation and this kind of thing.
That's right.
And that in the absence of that, the experience becomes very raw and feel very tuned.
Bend the knees. Tuned, I think that's a good metaphor, being tuned. A lot of Alexander people have come from the music industry, from being performers, because they understand what it means to be tuned or not tuned. They have an ear for Alexander. Literally, they have an ear for this work. And you are being tuned, because what does out of tune mean? Most of us are out of tune. It's a fact. We're out of tune. We go around and we distort and disturb ourselves almost all day. Then we go home and relax with a bottle of wine or something. But to be tuned in the middle of a day, when most of the time we frazzle our nervous systems, is quite rare.
It's quite an epiphany, actually. You realise, I can actually be in this state in the midst of
the craziness, the chaos, the addictive quality of speed and adrenaline and rushing around like headless chickens.
Well, I certainly found that because I've coming from the legal and financial industries, being right at the sort of epicenter of the corporate world and its busyness
and heels,
and being able to experience a little bit of that.
Bend the knees.
Wow.
So what was it like coming off the corporate button of buzz and hectic lifestyle with all the tension patterns that would accompany it? What was it like coming into a quieter, more mind zero state of being?
Fascinating, because the key thing is that there's this sort of myth that to perform at a high level in these kind of industries, you need to be constantly rushing, constantly busy, in this hyper-stressed state. I actually found that when I could retain this, sense of stillness and vitality, I actually performed much better, because you're just doing each task at the right speed at the right time without thinking about other things, And,
that's a really, really good way of putting it. I think there seems to be in the sort of corporate world a virtue of speed and effort, and so busy, as if that's somehow a wonderful thing to be all day, and that somehow if you're not in that crazy space, you're a slacker. But actually what you found is that when you do quieten down the overreactive nervous system and maintain your vitality, you actually perform at a higher level. Heal.
Yeah, would you agree then? I've seen a link between this feeling of poise, and there's something pleasurable about this Alexander-y kind of state. It feels that the system's kind of working as it should,
Little children enjoy the normal pleasures of the body in all its aspects. It's a normal thing to have pleasure in movement, pleasure in every aspect of our biology. And we lose that. We don't realize that actually being alive should be just pleasurable.
Pleasure indicates we're functioning well.
Functioning well, correct.
And so pleasure's completely linked to performance, and it's not some sort of self-indulgence, you know?
That's right. So when the average person walks in for an Alexander lesson, they say, you know, how are you doing? Nice to see you, and all the rest of it. That's just them, they're normal. They don't feel anything different or anything. Yeah. And they have a lesson, and it's suddenly like movements, simple movements of sitting, standing, talking, is pleasurable because the system is flowing. It's not broken up and jerky, disturbed, compressed. And there is something pleasurable about the human body that expands and is in the flow. There's something essentially pleasurable about that quality. And I think a lot of people get very drawn to Alexander through those very early lessons where they feel, goodness, I feel pleasure in my simple everyday movements that I haven't felt ever before, not in terms of their memory. And I think that's natural. I think we are designed to be in a state of pleasure and ease unless we're disturbed. But we lose that. It's one of the things we lose as we develop and grow and move into adulthood and beyond, that it gets lost. And we don't even realize it's available, don't even realize it's our birthright anymore. Let me take you forwards, stop and wait. That's good. And I'll take you back again, no reaction. You're staying back. A lot of Alexander's, the idea of staying back here, stay back from the drama, don't rush. And it's got nothing to do with slow motion. This can be available at match point in tennis when a ball's coming at you at 140 miles an hour. It's not about slow motion at all. It's about a quality of stillness of the nervous system at the highest level of movement. Let me take you further forwards and then stop and wait. No rush. I'll take you back. Doesn't matter if it's quick. Doesn't matter if you're here and here, but there's essentially a vitality and flow of your nervous system that's around. It's not about straight backs. It's not about correct positions for your shoulders. You're okay here. Stop. Stand up with your heels from there. And bend the knees from there. And heels. And then bend the knees from there. Good.
I suppose this changes your attitude to life quite a lot when you can accept the possibility of experiencing pleasure in everyday activities and in just simply being in your body. Then you become a little less hasty with doing, simple tasks, cleaning the dishes, walking around. You can treat these as opportunities to be at ease and experiencing pleasure rather than straining to get it done,
Yes, you could turn any act into a sort of Alexander practice, including washing the dishes and putting things in cupboards. Anything that is pleasurable is going to be something you want to repeat. But I wouldn't want you to think about, I've got to be really in an Alexander state while I'm doing the dishes. Otherwise you become overly self-conscious. And there's a big trap in this Alexander work, as there is in anything. That if you're over-efforting yourself to be mindful and in the flow and free, your mind gets overly busy with this idea, and you get the opposite of what you want. You get self-conscious and awkward.
Yeah, you're out of the mind zero.
You're out of the mind zero because your mind is busy, not zero, but busy and full and speeding into trying to get it right. And there's the paradox of Alexander, that actually you can only go towards mind zero when you really stop trying. When you really stop trying and efforting and giving yourself ambitious goals of getting it right, because those are the problems and not the solutions. So there is a lot of paradoxical learning in this Alexander technique. The second you get someone trying to get it right, they're out of the game. And you as a teacher have to say, look, there's nothing to get right. You're okay the way you are. There's nothing to strive for. Give yourself a break. It's okay. And they take a deep breath and go, oh, wow, I really thought I had to try to be good and get it right and be up and free. Say, no, not at all. And they take a deep breath, and suddenly something drops, some effort drops, and their eyes soften, and their necks free up. And suddenly they move, stand up with their heels, in a way that wasn't possible a few seconds ago when they were trying.
So to really be given permission for that, to really let go of trying to do anything at all, is quite rare and precious.
It is very rare and precious, and it's not an easy game because you can't try to let go of trying. So we're back to what we were saying earlier on, that actually it's not some word game you can learn about in a book and say, I'm going to just stop trying now because that's the answer. No, in good Alexander, you get it through experience of the guidance of the teacher's nervous system that says, this is what I mean. If I said, you know what, just go off and be mindful and be free and stop trying, all you're trying is making you stiff and self-conscious, it's just not working, just drop all that, surrender all of that business and just move towards ease and so on. You say, that's a great idea, Anthony. You know, I bought a self-help book 10 years ago, it said the same thing, it's still sitting on my shelf. But it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, it's infuriating.
It's infuriating. Yeah. So the beauty of this work is, you get an Alexander teacher that says, you know, put all the words on one side for a while, this is what I mean. And you'll say, and it's beyond words, as it should be, it's tactile, it's an experience. The touch of an Alexander teacher, which comes from the organization of the Alexander teacher, what's going on inside of me at this particular moment, is transmitted to you and sustained over time in movement. Stand up with the heels. Yeah, that's it.
And why is it you think that Alexander has not maybe proliferated to the extent it could have? You know, anyone who's had more than a few lessons of Alexander usually have sniffed the real gold there is to this stuff, but it doesn't seem quite as popular as other modalities.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something really important. Why aren't we the sort of the go-to for people that are looking for something that gives them a sense of health and well-being? And I think there's probably a number of answers. I don't think Alexander's very accessible. I think the old archaic language of Alexander is not very accessible. I think the jargon words of Alexander, which I'm certainly not going to be using here, are a bit alienating.
Yeah, it's almost like an Alexander Illuminati, that kind of...
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything secretive about Alexander. I think there's nothing particularly esoteric about Alexander, or mysterious. I think it's a very simple technique that goes to the core of what it means to be human in a state of ease or in a state of disturbance. I don't think there's anything weird. But I don't think it's been sold like that. I think it's often sold as a solution to a back problem or a structural problem, that you just have to get a good posture and we have to be up and straight and so on. And I think that's quite alienating for a lot of people. And it's not as sexy, it's not as appealing as many other things that are sold in the marketplace. You know, Pilates, yoga, meditation, mindfulness, somatic experiencing, different sorts of body therapies. These are all the rage, very exciting. And Alexander, it's like, well, what is it? People just don't even know what it is. Which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about Alexander in a way that made sense to me, and why I came up with a description of Alexander that I called Mind Zero, which was my understanding of what it is and what it could be.
Yeah, it immediately appeals to me, I think, that phrase, Mind Zero. I can see it.
But as I said, I make no claim to a monopoly of truth in the Alexander technique. There's a lot of excellent teachers out there that are doing some really, really good work. And we do have our different ways of understanding this work. And if Alexander came down today, he'd probably have a few new ideas himself. Or he would have evolved his understanding over years of working that might be a bit different to when he started. Let me take you further forwards and stop and wait. I want you to stay back against me as a way of not jumping. And stop. And as you stay back against me, I'm just going to ask you to stand up with your heels, but stay back against me, heels. And then bend the knees over your toes. And heels. And bend the knees. And heels. And then walk around a little bit. Yeah. And then come back again. Okay, I'm going to get you into the chair.
So would you say it's kind of our
backwards
duty,
and upwards.
Our duty as an Alexander community to
Heels.
Articulate this wonderful work in a way that is accessible to a modern audience?
Yeah, I do. I think, well, duty I don't know, but it's something I would like to be able to offer because I love the technique and I'd love it to be accessible to people and they understand what they're in for, to understand its potential, both as a technique for enhancing performance in activities, as well as a technique that can help with the aches and pains of the structure of the body, as well as a technique for emotional healing, which we haven't spent too much time talking about today, but it's inherent. Yeah, I think it is. If you're passionate about Alexander, you want to be able to offer it. And you want people to come through the door. And I think there's a way of talking about the technique that is more available for people's understanding and less alienating or mysterious.
Because there aren't really any fields where Alexander wouldn't help. Because I suppose being in a non-reactive, poised state can help you in any endeavour.
That's better.
Breathing again. There we go. Back to life.
Yes, so let's round off a few things or flesh out one or two things that maybe weren't so clear, either because they were muffled through the mask and visor or because I was busy working. So what came up that you wanted to maybe explore a little bit more clearly?
Sure, so just to talk about the potential of Alexander to enhance any activity in the world. One of the analogies you use, which I like, is it's as if we're teaching the nervous system to be like Roger Federer playing tennis. Or something like that.
Yeah, Muhammad Ali boxing, or some good examples of people at peak performance, Ronaldo or Messi playing football at their best. Yeah, I mean, you can see these wonderful performers whose nervous systems are remaining so undisturbed, so free, creative, spontaneously at peak performance that it just blows your mind. And yes, in a way, they've got things to teach us. Yeah.
And I suppose if this were to be disseminated more, if we had more nervous systems operating at a higher level, then that would kind of be infectious, right?
Yeah, I think infectious is a great word actually, because I think that's exactly the way Alexander works. I think we are infectious, with or without touch. If you walk into a room where there's a really bad atmosphere, you pick it up straight away. And often people walk into this training room, into the school, and they walk in, they feel sort of uplifted, and that's exactly the point. Something is infectious about being human, for better or for worse. When someone's really, really low, they can pull you down. When someone's got lifted spirits and you spend time with them, they'll tend to lift you up. And you could say the whole of the Alexander technique is about creating a reality where we're uplifted rather than pulled down. It's a great way of describing what we do, which means the person that's working with you has to have enough self-uplift themselves in order to be infectious in the right direction. If an Alexander teacher's in a real mess and very pulled down in their work with you, they can't infect you to be uplifted yourself. And that's the thing. And so the more we can train people to be more uplifted, we can work with this work with a huge variety of people.
And I suppose as such, when we talk about our state being infectious, the hands are a useful tool, but as the pandemic has forced us to adapt, we've realised that the hands are not necessary for the Alexander experience. Can you talk a little bit about how...
Yeah. Well, I never thought for a second that I would do anything other than use my hands until the pandemic came and we were asked to socially distance and to close down the school for a term. And I thought very carefully about it, and I realised that actually the infectiousness of an Alexander teacher, the communication, although primarily from the hands, is actually from themselves. And there are various vehicles that transmit. And I initially thought that only, the hands would be the best vehicle. And they are, perhaps, par excellence, the best vehicle, or a very primary vehicle. But I also understood very deeply that voice is also a vehicle for transmitting essential communication. That my use of self is very, very much communicated through my voice, and we know that. When you hear a person who's upset or nervous, you'll hear it in their voice. You know something about their being through the way they talk to you, their tone, their constriction or otherwise of their throats, the flavour of their words. You can hear everything. And it became very clear to me that actually if I'm in a certain state of mind-body myself, in a good state of mind zero, and I talk to somebody without touch, I can infect them in the same way. The trouble is I'd have to keep on talking and talking and talking in order to keep it continuous enough to have a deep effect. With touch, I keep my hands there, and you have an impact of the infectiousness of the Alexander teacher. Yeah. But with voice, it's not so easy, but it's the same principle. Voice and also gesture, a person's gesture, the eyes communicate, the facial gesture, body language communicates, and voice communicates. And so you can teach online with the same essential principles of the Alexander technique. You can. I'm not saying it's always advisable or always as easy, but to say that you can't offer something of ultimate value with voice through Zoom and through your gestures would be a disservice, because sometimes that may be the only available game in town. So I do believe that, well, we did a whole term, as you know, with the school online, and I've given a number of online sessions with students, pupils all over the world. And yes, people benefit from being infected, being guided through voice and being, voice and gesture. And that can be sustained, and you can learn from that. I still love using my hands, and I'm very happy to come back this term to using them, because I'm a tactile person. I really enjoy using my hands. But I do know that I can communicate something of the essence of my state of mind-body without my hands, and that's that's not zero impact. It can be very powerful.
Totally agree. Well, that's one little last crystal ball gazing question before we go. Is how would you like to see Alexander developing future years, and if you had a sort of a vision for Mind Zero in the future, what might that be?
Well, I like the idea of people coming into the Alexander work on all sorts of levels. I'm happy giving one-to-one lessons. I'm happy people coming in to do a 3-year training. And I'm also happy for people to come into this training room for a day, a week, a month and a year, and go towards Mind Zero within themselves, to go along a journey that is going to move towards more health and well-being. And not to see it in terms of having to have Alexander lessons, but to take what they want, really. And I would like enough Alexander teachers to be able to offer people coming into training rooms like this and participating for a week, a month, a term, 2 terms, a year, for self-development. for developing human capacities, not necessarily becoming Alexander teachers, which is a 3-year training, but for their own health and well-being. Because it's never just for their own health and well-being anyway, because the more tuned you are as a human being, even if you're not a teacher, you have an impact on everybody around you. So if I have a vision for Alexander, or Mind Zero, my vision is that more people participate in this process. That process means that those that are more tuned will be impacting those close to them. And it has a knock-on effect. So I love that idea, really. The idea that actually...
You have no idea how
you never,
indirect
well,
it
goes as far as it goes, doesn't it? So, yeah, that's it. Come and participate, do a week, a month, a term. Whatever you do is going to be healing for you as a human being, and ultimately beneficial for those around you, even if you don't put your hands on them. So I don't think it's like you either become a teacher or you just have one-to-one lessons. You can have one-to-one lessons for 30 sessions. You can have 2 years, 5 years, 10 years of one-to-one lessons, or immerse yourself in an Alexander experience of 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, 16 hours a week. It's
that's quite immersive.
It's immersive, and there's value in that too. Some people prefer the one-to-one route of an hour, half an hour of sessions, once, twice a week, or 3. And the immersive way of moving into an Alexander room, which is infectious, where the guidance of the Alexander teachers takes you further because of your immersion. I think that's a very exciting prospect too. So yeah, that's a vision.
It'll be a bit of a nutter though.
I think you have to be a nutter to do this sort of work. Yeah, I agree.
To go that deep.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thanks
I
for.
Really appreciate that, and I hope this is helpful for you, dearest viewer.
Well, thank you. You know, without actually you asking me questions, I'm a bit of an idiot, and I don't come up with very interesting things. And actually, the skill is for you. Your skill of asking me the right questions helps to bring out something reasonably intelligent from me. So thank you too for bringing out the best or better from me. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Well, we can't do a handshake.
No, we can't.
Yeah, maybe put a visor in it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.